Namaste and welcome. I'm Melanie Phillips of the Maduri Method, and I'm answering questions from the 5-day Ayurvedic Yoga Challenge. So I hope that you've had an opportunity to go through all of those classes to get a feel for the different energies that correspond to the different elements. So that training over the 5 days was based on the Ayurvedic elements as earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And the way that I constructed those classes, or they were like mini classes, right? Little snippets, so you could get an experience of how that element feels in your body, or perhaps the lack thereof, how it feels not to be able to connect to that element very easily. There will be elements that we feel more inclined to marinate in and to operate from. So some people are naturally going to be more fiery. Some people are naturally going to be more airy. Some people are going to naturally be more earthy. And we can cultivate the elements that we're wanting to utilize and tap into. So for example, if someone's quite sort of meek and shy and perhaps lacking a voice or confidence in their life and in their world, it will behoove them to work with some of the fire practices to tap into that solar energy, to tap into that Manipur chakra, that fire center within our chakra system, which ripples out into our physiology and vice versa. It's a two-way street. So this is how we can work with these practices. In my Ayurvedic yoga trainings, I work mostly with teachers, and what I feel is really important for teachers is to have a range, that we aren't just stuck in the air element teaching our class and our little yoga voice, and it's always like that. But sometimes we need to wake up the energy. Sometimes we need to ground the energy. As a yoga teacher, you're really a conductor, an orchestrator of energy. And when you create a container for your students to be in and then conduct, not force, not impose the energy on the students, but literally conduct the flow of that energy in the class, you can have even more powerful and medicinal healing classes than just going in randomly to teach a really cool flow that you created, or the putting together the postures that you like doing, for example. So I had some questions come in that I thought I would answer here for you in case you are also curious about how to work with these elements in a really practical way. Because Ayurveda, as much as it might seem esoteric, or we're talking about these 5 elements, where does that really mean? It is so grounded in practicality and the science. Ayurveda literally means the science of life, the wisdom of life, the knowledge of life. So I had a question come in about how do I choose practices for my home sadhana? Like, how do I put my home practice together? Okay, there's a lot of things to consider. First of all, how much time in the day do you want to spend doing your home practice? That's going to be really important, because I feel that it should be something that you're able to sustain. So I talk to people who are really enthusiastic and say, oh, well, I want to do an hour-long practice. And I've seen over the years how this goes for people. First day, it goes really well. Maybe even the second day, the third day, or even for a week. But sooner or later, life kind of gets in the way, and that hour-long practice for most people isn't sustainable. Now, if you're one of those people that you're nailing it and you've got your hour that you get up and create that space in the morning, that's awesome. And if you're not, if you're really struggling to weave in a personal sadhana into your day even, then I'd say start with something small. So figure out, how much time am I willing to commit consistently to my practice? Maybe it's 5 minutes, maybe it's 20 minutes. It doesn't really matter, but the consistency is what is going to allow you to feel the transformation and the benefits from the practice. If we do it once, it's like, okay, you might have a great experience, but to really begin to reprogram the neural pathways, to really begin to influence the system in a meaningful way, we need to do things daily and consistently. So that's the first thing I would say, is how much time are you really able to commit to. And there's no right or wrong in it. More isn't necessarily better. Presence is what matters in your practice. So if you're just doing an hour-long practice, but you're not really there, you're going through the motions of it, you're on automatic pilot. And I know I have been there in my life at times where I'm just going through the motions, or it's something I think, well, I'm supposed to do a morning practice, so here I am doing it and going through the motions, but I'm not fully engaged, I'm not fully present. So finding where you can commit to being present for that practice. So maybe it's 10 minutes and that's fantastic. Maybe it's an hour, doesn't matter. But what are you really going to be able to commit to? The other things to consider, you want to think about, well, what time of day am I doing my practice? There are different times of day that are related to the doshas. So the doshas of Vata, Pitta, and Kapha in Ayurveda. We have between 6 and 10, this is both AM, and PM is the Kapha time of day. So that's the time of day that whether you have a lot of the Kapha, the earth and water energies in your constitution naturally, we're all affected by that Kapha, that more steady, heavier time of day. That's often why people getting up in the morning between those hours feel groggy or feel like they need their coffee. Conversely, sometimes for Vata or Pitta people, those morning hours are where they can be most focused, most mentally focused particularly. So that's a good time for them to get work done in those early morning where the nervous system is still slow and steady and grounded. And then we have 10 to 2 AM and PM is the Pitta time of day. We see that, right, with the sun in the sky. The sun is the hottest between 10 and 2. Our inner sun, our Agni, we call it Agni, Agni, is also strongest at that point in time, midday. And this is where there's a lot of heat and intensity in our system. So we want to bring balance. We don't want to add more fire to the fire. So that would not be the best time of day to go and do an intense cardio exercise or the most intense yoga practice of your life. It is a really good time to have your largest meal in the day. Midday, when our digestive fire is strongest, is the ideal time to have our large, kind of heaviest meal. In our culture, often we have our heavy meal at dinner and sometimes even 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at night. And then unfortunately what happens is the inner fire of the body, the Agni, has gone down just like the outer sun has set. So our metabolic function is slower at that time and we can't digest our food. So we eat our big dinner late and then we go to bed on it and then our food isn't processed. And often what can be created is something called ama, and this is toxicity, that undigested food particles. You might see that showing up on your tongue in the form of a film. It could be coating, such as a white coating, a yellowish or greenish coating. Those are all related to Vata, Pitta, Kapha. If there's the white coating, it's a little bit more Kapha in nature. If it's yellow or green, it can be signaling an increase in Pitta. So this is how we begin to notice, what am I not digesting? What am I not assimilating? And if we're having food that we're not digesting, it's not of value to you, because your body's having to work really, really hard and it's not assimilating the benefits, the nutrients, the prana, the energy from it. So we have the Pitta time of day, and then we have the Vata time of day, which is 2 to 6 a.m. and p.m. Those early morning Vata hours traditionally have been said to be a really good time for meditation because we are more etheric. We're in that more etheric realm between 2 and 6 a.m. We're closer to the ethers. That's often when our dream time is really strong. And it's often when our nervous system, if our nervous system is not regulated, we might have difficulty sleeping and waking up restless between those hours of 2 and 6. So when we're talking about how to choose which yoga practices to do when, we'd want to consider what time of day are you doing your practice. So like increases like and opposites are going to reduce or balance. So my suggestion would be to know, first of all, what are you trying to balance within yourself? Are you needing more invigoration? Are you needing more relaxation, more steadiness? Look to the quality of your nervous system. everything comes back to the state of your nervous system. So many people in our world are walking around with a dysregulated nervous system. In Ayurvedic speak, we would say the vata is high or amplified, and we want the elements to be in balance with your nature. It doesn't mean that there's an equal ratio of the 5 elements. It means that they are all in alignment with your, we call it prakruti, which is your original nature or your original constitution. And that's a discussion for another time. But circling back to looking at, well, what kind of practices do I want to do when? I'm not a proponent for doing intense exercise in the evening time when we're wanting to really relax and prepare the body for a deep sleep. Now, I understand that there are people that have different kind of work schedules where that might be the only time they can get their exercise program in. And what I would say to that is, okay, if you're needing to do your exercise, invigorating exercise in the evening, complete or conclude your practice with something that is grounding and balancing and pacifying for your nervous system, such as alternate nostril breathing, such as slow, calm, steady abdominal breathing. Some practice that is going to bring you back so that you're not running like this and then trying to settle down and go to bed. Makes sense that those things are going to be counterproductive. So we want to think of the time of the day. The morning time is the ideal time to get up, to sweat, to move the body, to get the flow of energy moving. That is the ideal time during that kapha time of day between 6 and 10 in the morning. So if you can get yourself up, do some kind of morning exercise, that's going to serve you well. In Ayurveda, timing matters. Timing of, when we eat, when we sleep, timing of our activities matter and influence our body differently. So it's not like, oh, well, I'm eating an organic meal at midnight, it should be good. No, we don't look at it that way. There's these natural rhythms of the external environment, and we are a microcosm of that macrocosm, and ideally we can line up, we can come into rhythm, come into harmony, so that our environment of our inner being and the outer environment of our outer world can flow. It doesn't mean we have to mimic one another, but that there's a harmony, a synchronized feeling state of ease, of grace. The majority of the time, life isn't always going to be rainbows and Skittles, but that the majority of the time we can come back to our peaceful center, the state where our nervous system is regulated. So consider the time of day, the time of year. The different times of year are relating to vata, pitta, and kapha. So we have the summertime, it's the fire time of year related to the pitta dosha. We have the fall and the first half of winter related to vata, air and ether elements. And then we have the second half of winter and the spring connected to kapha, to the earth and water elements. So again, we're wanting to bring balance by doing opposites. So if we're in the summertime, the fire time of the year, we don't need more heat and intensity. That's a time to do a more cooling, centering, grounding, playful, lighthearted practice without the intensity and the judgment and the harshness that pitta can sometimes operate from when out of balance. We want to look at, well, what's the climate that you're in? Because summer for me here in Vancouver is going to look very different to summer in Florida, for example. We have to understand, well, what's the climate and what are the qualities of the climate that I'm in? We want to look at how old you are and the current state. So someone who's 18 years old is going to do a different practice to someone who's 65. Not that a 65-year-old can't do a rigorous practice if that is going to be truly what serves them, but to understand the phases of the life. So from birth to puberty, we're in the kapha stage. We're in that earth and water phase of life where the body's building up, where you can see kids got a lot of kapha, snotty noses and runny noses, and we have that baby fat that is really important for building the foundation of our life, that grounding, that stability. And then we move into the Pitta, the fire time of life between puberty and menopause. So in our 50s-ish. So that phase of life for both men and women, I understand men don't go through menopause, but that age range is the Pitta, it's the fire time of life. And we see that. That's when we're most engaged in the world. That's when most people are out kind of doing, achieving, working and building their careers. It's the Pitta time of life. So if one has a lot of Pitta in their constitution, they have to be really careful that they don't go into Pitta imbalances of inflammation, of any of the itises, right? Whether it's colitis or tendinitis, we've got inflammation or overheatedness in the body. And being overheated internally, I'm not just talking about body temperature, we're talking about the energy and the metabolic function of the elements of fire and of water, which we call Pitta dosha. So we need to look at our whole life and see where there is too much fire, too much intensity. We can reduce that with diet, proper diet, according to the dosha, in this instance, Pitta, lifestyle practices, looking at our mental, emotional constructs and see where we might be taking ourselves further out of balance through judgment, criticism, frustration, impatience, all of these fiery type energies that will just keep moving us down that road of imbalance. So that's really the thing to think about, is where am I starting from? What is my current state? We call that Vikruti. What is my current state? And what would the opposite be? So if I am feeling super overwhelmed, fatigued, tired, exhausted, I would say, okay, well, the Vata is high. Vata meaning air and ether. So there's two, think of a tornado coming in and blowing things around. So the opposite would be to stop, to stabilize, to ground the energy, to become consistent, become routine in sleeping and eating. So a yoga practice that is pacifying Vata is going to focus on really grounding, maybe even not getting off of the floor in that yoga practice, doing lots of things connected to the earth, really feeling the support of the earth. It could be a restorative practice. It might be a yin type practice or a gentle hatha flow connected to the breath. Everything is a choice. And the asana, pranayama, meditation, mudra, bandha, all of these tools create an alchemical experience in our practice. So understanding what asana practice does what, we're going to choose and make different choices. So for example, a forward fold has a very different effect to a back bend. And we have to understand, well, what practices do what, so that we're choosing responsibly and choosing intelligently and choosing skillfully in our practice. Now, depending on where you are, if you're a student and you're going to your yoga classes and the teacher is in charge, then for you, I would offer to become more and more self-responsible, even though you're being led through a class, and make any fine-tuned tweaks or adjustments in those classes for yourself so that you know what is best going to serve you. So for instance, this is just a little example. Say I go to a yoga class and I know I want to pacify or reduce Vata. I want to really settle my nervous system. And say I end up somehow in a yoga class that's quite rigorous and doing lots of vinyasa, like looking up and down. I might choose to keep my gaze forward instead of taking the gaze up, which increases the prana that comes up into the head. And if we're wanting to pacify Vata, we want to focus on Apanavayu, which is the energy that moves down, that is grounding. So I wouldn't lift my head, and maybe I would move slower than the rest of the class, or I would take pauses in child's pose, or I would just stand in Tadasana, in mountain pose, instead of doing certain things perhaps. I think it's really important that as students in yoga classes, we give ourselves that permission to really take ownership for our experience and what we're wanting out of the class, instead of just following along, thinking that we have to do everything that is sort of offered up. So those are the things to consider when you're creating your own classes. Another question that was emailed in is how to bring these concepts into a class as a teacher, because we have different students. So same as I've just mentioned, we want to look at the time of day, the time of year, the climate, like the region that you're in, the age. And I know in a drop-in yoga class, which is not an ideal setting, we're going to get all variants of all of these things. And this is when we need even more attunement to the energy in the room and more skill in choosing the asana, pranayama, the mudra, and the bandha. Those kinds of things I go into great detail in my 100-hour Ayurvedic yoga training. For the sake of today's Facebook Live, it's such a vast topic that we have to look at the details of it. But the things that I've just mentioned, the time of day, the time of year, the climate, the age, the vikruti, what is the current state, you can even read the room, right? Your students come in and they all lie down on the floor and they're just like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. There's generally a vibe, there's generally a collective energy about things, or people come in and they're all chatty and da 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 da. And as the teacher, you get to choose, how am I going to conduct? How am I going to orchestrate the prana, the flow of energy in that room? Is this time to bring the energy down and ground it? Or is it the time to spark the energy of the room, bring the fire energy into the class? And that's, as a teacher, you know and come to know through experience, through observation, through listening, what are the best choices, and also getting really clear about how do you want your students to leave that class? What is your intention? And when you know your intention of how you want the nervous system of your students to feel when they leave the class, therefore you're going to choose appropriate practices to support your intention and the energy you're wanting to create. I totally love alternate nostril breathing, the Nadi Shodhan. I think it should be taught in every single yoga class because it is so powerful, and it is going to stabilize, bring balance to the nervous system of the students. Okay, is this helpful? Hi guys, nice to see you all here. If you have any questions, feel free to type them in. These are just ones that were sent to me and that I'm coming to the end of. Just to reiterate, it's about looking at the nervous system, and that is going to be, for yourself, if you're doing a home practice, tapping into where am I at in my life right now, and what do I need to support that. That is going to be the most important way to make your choices as to what you're doing. I am not a proponent for pushing. I'm really interested in inquiry and in listening deeper. And that means listening deeper to our bodies. And it doesn't always mean doing the most like gentle thing, but often it does, because we're typically taught to push, to work hard, to, not listen to our body, to keep go, 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 go. And I don't know, to me, that seems like an old paradigm of an outdated, like 1980s aerobics class or something. Like, it's not serving us. It's not serving us to push harder, to keep going. There are moments in our practice and in our life that if we're up against a neural pathway of resistance, of heaviness, that fire energy may be required. For the majority of people that I work with and see, is that the nervous system is operating like this. So to push through, it amplifies this. So in Ayurveda, we would say that's vata pushing pitta. So think about the state of your nervous system, mind, body, energy body, all of that is important when deciding which practices are going to serve you on any given day, and listening to your intuition instead of thinking that this is yoga and I have to get up in the morning and put my mat out and do a yoga position. I'd say throw that out the window and let your body move. Let your body move in circles, let your body move in cycles, let your body move in a more natural way, because yoga is very linear, right? We have these rectangle mats and we're putting our hands out here and then we're here, and then it's very masculine in its energy, or it can be. So I would invite you to set that aside sometimes and just feel how your body wants to move. There's a lot of power in exploring that. When we go to a class, in a way, we're disempowering ourselves if we disengage from our body and our knowing, and we're just following the teacher. If we're just following that external experience of the teacher, we're going to be disempowering ourselves because we've forgotten, or we're just giving over our authorship to someone that's not even in our body. So that's one really important part of Ayurveda is awareness. In fact, it's the most important part. We have to start with awareness. And we begin there, and that sustains us and carries us through. Without the awareness, it's not yoga, it's not Ayurveda. So question from Devin. Hi, Devin. I'm interested in learning more about Nausea, when or how to do it. Can you make your own oil blend, etc.? Okay, so Devin's asking about Nausea, which is a medicated oil that you put in your nose. Many of you have probably heard about neti pot. Neti pot is the salt water. They're both nostril practices that you put inside your nose, but have two different functions. Nausea is oil. Oil is unctuous. It's heavy. So it's grounding. It's stabilizing. Therefore, it's really good for Vata and for Pitta. Kapha has a lot of oily quality naturally, so they need less external oil typically. Nausea is one of the karmas of the Panchakarma, and you can do it on your own by just using organic sesame oil, organic ghee, organic coconut oil. What I'll do as a daily practice is just put some Nausea on my pinky finger, clean of course, and put that inside the nostril in both sides, and then wash your hands after. Probably don't need to explain that part. And then you would inhale deeply to take that oil up into the nasal cavity. So you want to draw that oil up. When this practice of Nausea is done as karma in the Panchakarma series, you would do this in a deeper way. You would lie back on the sofa, have your nostrils parallel to the sky, and drop 5 drops of that Nausea oil into the nose, and then again, deep inhale. And then you would want to lie there with your head back for a little bit of time, 5 minutes, I would say at least. And so that oil is draining, and this is very good for the nervous system. This is very good for, it is said, many of the issues from the neck up, Nausea is going to be wonderful for. Good for memory. Can you make your own oil blend? Well, no. I mean, you can if you're knowing how to concoct or decoct herbs into oil. The oils used in Nausea are medicated oils. So I would say go to banyanbotanicals.com. They have a Nausea product that you can buy. It's not essential oils. You don't want to necessarily make an essential oil blend that you're going to rub on your body, because this is very, very delicate an area. And when you're taking that into the frontal lobes of the brain, you don't want to be just taking in essential oils, would be my recommendation for that, for the Nausea. I would say buy a blend that's already made, unless you are already decocting Ayurvedic herbs into oil for Abhyanga, for example. The Banyan Botanicals Nausea oil, I believe there is some essential oil in there, but it's based in herbal oils. So I feel like things like that, because you're taking it internally, whereas Abhyanga, the Ayurvedic oil massage, you're just putting that on your skin. You can make your own oils fairly safely. Again, there's still contraindications for certain essential oils, like the citrus oils. You don't want to put those directly on your skin, and even careful in a carrier oil. But when you're taking things internally, you want to be really sure of the quality and how things are done. So that would be my recommendation to you. Hopefully that answers your question, Devin. And some of you were asking about, well, what's the difference between my Ayurveda for Real Life online 7-module program and 100-hour program? There's a big difference in those two programs. The 7-module is 7 modules of audio that it's a beautiful overview of Ayurveda. It's a great place to dive in and start and learn more about the history, the philosophy, about Vata, Pitta, Kapha, about food and nutrition, there's a module on Ayurvedic yoga practice. There's a module on working with essential oils and gemstones and sound, mantra. So it's a beautiful overview. For those of you who are wanting to go deeper, the 100-hour Ayurvedic Yoga Training is for teachers or for dedicated students. So anyone who's been practicing yoga for at least 5 years that is really interested and intrigued by Ayurveda and would like to learn in a deeper way and bring those practices into your life. So the 7-module Ayurveda for Real Life program is 50% off until January 25th, I believe. And the 100-hour program starts in February, and the early bird tuition ends February 1st. So you can email me separately if you have any questions. Well, you can ask them here, or if you have personal questions about those, you're welcome to email me. Karen says, any helpful hints on tuning into the type of yoga breathing that may be beneficial on a given day? Kapalbhati versus Ujjayi, alternate nostril, etc. Yes. Yes, let me get a sip of water. Okay, so Karen, great question. And the Pranayama practices, our breathing practices, are so powerful, and we should be using them daily, I believe. And we should, if we're yoga teachers, we do need to be learning how to offer those in a skillful, helpful way in our classes, not just randomly, because, you know, Kapalbhati doing that in the middle of summer at a noontime yoga class with a bunch of Pitta people in your class, it's like, what choice is that serving, and is that helpful? The understanding of what the practices do is key. You know, like, what is Kapalbhati for? What is alternate nostril breathing for? What is Ujjayi for? Are the practices, is it heating or cooling, is the first question we want to ask. So is it stimulating or pacifying to the nervous system? Those are the two main questions. Is it heating or cooling? Is it stimulating or pacifying? We start there. So something like Kapalbhati, heating or cooling, you do a few rounds of it, you're going to find it's quite heating and stimulating. So would that be a good practice before bed? No, no, it would not. Ujjayi is one that I have found can be both cooling or heating, depending on our focus, our intention with it, and how we're using it. Oftentimes, Ujjayi is taught in a little bit too much of a forceful way, where the teacher might cue, like, make sure you can hear your neighbor, and like kind of we're really forcing this breath at the back of the throat and the epiglottis as we contract that area, and we're creating more tension in the body. So Ujjayi can be done in a really grace-filled way and a more subtle way where there's no force. So therefore, if we're not forcing it, which we should not be forcing any pranayama practice, because if we're forcing the breath carries the prana, and if we're forcing that breath in any way, it means we're either doing a practice too soon. If we can't do the full yogic breath where we're breathing into the abdomen, then the ribs, then the chest, and doing that 3-part breath in a really fluid, gentle rhythm, if we're already straining or skipping over any part of that that breathing, then we're likely creating strain in the nervous system. So go back to basics. The 3-part yogic breath. We might spend years working that until it feels so fluid and so calm that when we go into something like alternate nostril breathing, the Nadi Shodhan, we can do it with ease, where we're not tensing up, where we're not taking in too much breath or straining to exhale. So as I mentioned earlier, the alternate nostril breathing is tridoshic. That can be done before bed. That can be done any time of day, anywhere, anyhow, not lying down. And I think that is a practice that as a teacher, start teaching your students that. It's a gift that you can offer them, because they can take that and balance the 2 hemispheres of their brain with it, calm their nervous system, pacify strong emotions with this breathing practice. So that becomes a real gift. And if we're avoiding these practices as teachers, as offering them in our classes because we don't know how to work with them, then that's the time we need to engage and learn about these, use these practices. That's the only way we should be teaching things, is if we've used them ourselves and understand the alchemy of them. So great question, Karen. Devin, okay, great. I'm glad that answered your previous question. Wonderful. Oh, hey, Bill. Bill says, now that I'm a senior, I prefer to do my own yoga practice rather than going to a class. There doesn't seem to be any unforced classes being offered. Yeah, I hear you, and I'm sure there are. I know here in Vancouver, Yoga Outreach is offering a lot of awareness and classes around teaching teachers about nonviolent communication and nonviolent, even words. The way that as yoga teachers we might use a word like, I don't know, push, or things that just come out really subtly but can be very triggering for people, especially if there's been trauma. So yeah, Bill, I would say look for either a really good teacher in your area, or look for a more restorative or hatha class. And then at the very least, if you like going, because it can be nice to be in community and be around other people, give yourself permission to go in the back, do your own thing. And, without distracting the rest of the class, but alter things, adjust things to suit your rhythm, to suit your needs. And the other great way that I hear a lot of people really love is online. One of the online yoga websites where they offer hundreds of different classes. And I'm imagining that within those online classes, there's a lot of scope that you can choose a class that suits your level, your interest, and your sensibilities. So hopefully that answers your question, Bill. And I would just say keep honoring where you're at and following what feels good in your body, no matter what, is the most important thing. All right, well, so lovely to see you beautiful humans showing up here today. And I really appreciate you. I really appreciate you listening and learning, and also reflecting things back as I continue to learn and grow in my own teaching and in my own life. So thank you so much. If you're wanting to look at the Ayurveda for Real Life course, it's on my website, madurimethod.com. That's the 7-module program. If you're wanting to do a deeper dive into Ayurveda, that's also on my website. That's the 100-hour program that's coming up in February. So much love to you all, and many blessings, and have a beautiful day. Ciao.